Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. My name's Nick Park, and I wanted to share with you today an incident that happened across the Irish Sea in the UK, in the greater Manchester area, an area of the country where I actually lived for a number of years. A construction firm has been fined £120,000 for health and safety offences. And apparently the major thing that brought this company to the attention of the authorities was a photograph that went viral online, which was basically showing some workers who had to get up to near the top of a house in order to set a block in place. The houses were luxury houses, and each one was individualized, and there was basically a space left, so a stone block with the name of the house on could be then set in place, so each house would have this luxury personal touch. And this was the last bit. The rest of the houses was built and completed. This was, if you like, the finishing touch was to put these blocks, these personalized blocks in place. The problem was the company didn't think it was worth the while of building scaffolding in order for the workers that would set that block in place to be able to access it safely. It wasn't a job you could do climbing a ladder. It was a two-man job, a big stone block. And so what did they do? They got two guys to sit in the bucket of a JCB, and then they extended it up so they were sat in the bucket, and they stood up in the bucket of the JCB and then began lifting the block and setting it in place. Somebody took a photograph. They said, look at this for health and safety. It went viral online, it came to the attention of the authorities, and now the company has ended up paying a fine of £120,000. Scaffolding can be expensive to put up. I've been involved with construction projects where I've had to hire scaffolding, and I understand something about all the legislation that surrounds scaffolding. You've got to have, only certain, at one time, when I was a kid working on construction sites, anybody could build scaffolding. They said, there's a scaffolding, and you sort of worked out how to do it as you went along. Times have changed. You've got to have your certification and everything else. And putting up scaffolding can be an expensive business, but not as expensive as paying a fine for £120,000. I bet that construction company wishes now that they had just gone about things the right way with the scaffolding instead of trying to take a shortcut by using a JCB bucket as a lift instead. There's always a temptation to take shortcuts. There's times whenever we know that something should be done right, it should be done in a certain way, but it just seems like too much trouble, and taking a shortcut seems the answer instead. I think probably all of us at one time or another have taken shortcuts that we wished we hadn't. I remember one time I was living in the northwest of England, and I took a young child to go and visit her great-grandmother. And we actually lived, as the crow flies, we were about a mile away from her house. But the only way we could get there by public roads was by driving several miles, and it probably would take 20-30 minutes to drive around. Or I could take a shortcut across some fields, come on the back of another road, and be there in no time at all. Well, I took the shortcut, and somewhere along the road in the field, I left behind the exhaust of my car that snagged on a rock, and I regretted taking that shortcut. One thing we can't afford to take shortcuts with are the standards that God gives us, whether it's the standards that God gives us for marriage, for being ethically responsible with money, with being good citizens by obeying the laws of the land. Sometimes we are tempted to take shortcuts. It doesn't work. So often taking the shortcut ends up being much more expensive than if we'd just done the thing properly in the first place. I would encourage you today, particularly if it's something to do that's in the Word of God, if it's something to do where God has given us his standards, don't try to take a shortcut. Do it the right way, do it God's way. It may well turn out to be quicker and less expensive in the long run. God bless you today. Join us again next time for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.